The banking collapse was planned in advance to move the U.S. to digital currency and eventually to the mark of the beast. Looks like it's time for the last day's overcomer conferences to begin. The Silicon Valley Bank collapse was something they knew was coming. Biden admitted his administration knew it was going to happen a week before it did. They alerted Israel so Israel could get their money out of the bank. Yet the actual announcement came Friday night, when none of us little guys, normal folks, were watching. How does that make you feel? And what was the purpose? Why, if they knew in advance this was going to happen, didn't they stop it before it happened? Ha ha! Because they want you to be afraid. All of this, of course, appears to have been planned and orchestrated. There seems to be a purpose in every move they make. And that purpose seems to be a worldwide takeover, a great reset. We seem to be in the process of watching a well-worked-out, detailed blueprint of events unfolding. And the banking collapse is only part of it, just the latest part. But it's a very critical part of it. Did you know that the Federal Reserve acquired Silicon Valley Bank? They now control it. The deep state now runs that bank, and they plan to run more. Maybe most of the banks. Why? To move us, as we said, to digital currency. To watch and control every dollar you spend. And this is only the next step in their process. Think about how every 3 to 5 months since 2020, something new has come along. First, there was the pandemic that now nearly everyone admits was a human-designed virus. Immediately, lockdowns were imposed that devastated economies and shut down vast numbers of small businesses. Let's keep that in mind because we're going to talk about it again in this video. Then, 3 months later, riots in the streets. Then, 3 more months, and the most contested election in U.S. history. And we know the impacts of that election are still being felt in every aspect of your life today. Then, just 3 months later, we had the vast overspending that led to the inflationary spiral, further damaging the economy. 3 months later, we had the rollout of mandatory vaccines, no jab, no job. Today, my family just got the toxicology and coroner's report on the death of my 32-year-old nephew. He died suddenly of myocarditis and advanced brain inflammation. Any correlation here to what they were requiring? Then, 5 months later, the Ukraine crisis started. Then 3 months after that, the planned takeover of the world's health systems by the World Health Organization. And if not for the objection of a group of African nations, that would have probably succeeded, and unfortunately will probably succeed later this year. Then Russia began to threaten the West with nuclear weapons. Then, on and on it went, leading up to this week's banking failures. And yes, it was multiple banks, if you didn't hear. Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum calls this group of problems a polycrisis. Here's his quote: famine, floods, pestilence, drought, plague, war, and rumors of war. These are the key issues facing the world today. Jesus, in Matthew 24, called these same things the beginning of the birth pangs. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. Matthew 24, 6-7. Klaus and his sidekick, Yuval Noah Harari, have said, quote, Jesus is fake news, end of quote. But Klaus certainly was quoting Jesus. Both Klaus and our Lord are placing these events right where they belong in terms of prophetic history. Which brings us to the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the USA, Credit Suisse, the second largest bank in Switzerland, and Signature Bank, the 14th largest USA bank. And famously, the one that shut down Trump's accounts after January 6, 2021. I guess that's justice being served to that bank in some ways. In a lot of other ways, this is lockdown 2.0. The lockdowns decimated small businesses and allowed big merchants like Amazon and Walmart to stay open. They consolidated then the retail world with that lockdown into just a fewer number of companies. Most of the business is now concentrating in these mega corporations. And it appears they're using inflation to decimate the small and medium-sized banks. Again, it's a consolidation of business into the banks they control, like Wells Fargo and Bank of America. And it's all designed to force us into central bank digital currencies. More on that in just a moment. But after all that bad news, how about some good news? What should Christians be doing in the midst of what is being done to us by these globalists? Marquis Laughlin, Jake McCandless, and I decided to form Last Days Overcomers, and today we're set to announce our first 3 conferences, the How to Prepare for the Last Days conferences. What to do right now and in the next couple of years as the hard times before Jesus' return begin. What to do in this beginning of the birth pangs era that we're about to enter. We're coming to Cincinnati, Ohio's Radisson on Saturday, June 10th. This will be an all-day conference, and we're going to talk about things you can't talk about elsewhere. And we're going to talk about what you can do when the economy fails, because we all know that it will. Things to do as the World Economic Forum and the UN begin to take over, because we know they will. It's in the Bible. Then, in July, Saturday, July 29th, we're coming to Springdale, Arkansas, to the Jones Center. And on Saturday, August 26th, we'll be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Mall of America. Yes, the Mall of America, where that man was denied entrance because he had a Jesus shirt on. Our 4th conference will likely be in Texas, but we aren't ready to announce just where yet because that one isn't finalized. And we're going to plan on 2 or 3 more in the fall. Then, likely 1 a month until they don't allow us to do this anymore. And you know that will happen. So who do we have to thank for these conferences? We have to thank you, because our community was so faithful in giving when we had our fundraising drive back in December that we're able to put on 3 conferences this summer, probably 3 or 4 conferences in the winter. If you believe in this kind of thing, you can still give. The lines are still open on lastdaysovercomer.org. Feel free to keep supporting so we can keep doing this until, as we said, we know they're going to stop us someday. So what should you do if you live in those spots? And what should you do if you don't? If you live in Ohio, for instance, come to the conference. We would love to see you there, meet you, and answer your heartfelt questions during one of the 4 Q&A sessions. Yes, we're answering your questions, the ones no one else will answer. And if you are so moved by the Spirit, we need volunteers for these events, not only from those folks in Ohio, but Kentucky, Indiana, maybe even West Virginia. People who feel like we do about being the ones Daniel spoke of 2,500 years ago. And the wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they may stumble. Daniel 11:33. Let's be among that number. So if you want to volunteer, you need to let us know, and we'll let you see where the links are in just a second. And of course, the same thing goes for Arkansas, and it goes for Minneapolis. If you live near those spots, get a ticket or tickets for your whole small group and sign up to help us on site. We need your help desperately. Down in the description below this video, we have links for tickets and we have links to volunteer. Be sure to tell us what city you want to help in. But let's say you don't live near one of those cities, but you'd still like to attend an event and would like to ask live, real-time questions. Well, we're doing online events, playing back every word of the conference, And all three of us, me, Jake, and Marquis, will be live on air answering a whole new set of questions for these online events. The online events will be about 2 weeks after the live event, and tickets will become available, if you live in Idaho or New York or London or Paris or wherever. The only thing you won't get with the online event is a free lunch. You'll be hearing information on these online conferences from time to time on this channel. But remember, tickets and volunteering right now are down in the description. And one more thing about volunteering. We really could use some more help from people who are videographers, both at the conferences and to help produce these videos on the Nelson Walters channel. You've probably noticed some of the videos are coming out saying produced by Kenny Gibbons or any of the other really fine videographers we have on our video team. If you want to join that team, let us know because we could use your help. Now, back to the banking crisis. As we said, this isn't some standalone crisis. The banks are failing because of inflation and investments that they are holding from the days when there was no inflation, that only paid like really low interest rates. So more is going out than coming in. The pandemic was an excuse for the overspending in 2021, which caused the inflation, which is now causing the banking failures that we see. The crisis is affecting mid-sized banks. Notice it isn't the big boys who are failing. The plan is to say goodbye to your local banks. As we mentioned before, this is like lockdown 2.0 because if you think about what happened during the lockdowns, it was a consolidation of power. The Walmarts and the Amazons became powerful. They could get deliveries, or they could absorb the lack of foot traffic in their stores, and the small businesses went under because small businesses weren't able to do the same things the big boys were. And the same thing is about to happen to banks. And they wanted that to happen. They wanted to push the small guys out. They wanted to consolidate power in the big banks that they can more easily control. Dozens of major regional lending banks have seen their stocks tank over the past week. As much as 70% of regional banks, according to something called MarketWatch, are seeing the flight of deposits too, as these medium and small banks are having people take money out of them and put it in the mega banks like Chase, Bank of America, etc. So people are pulling their money out of the small, little regional banks and flooding them into the big banks. And we said this is exactly what the cartel of globalists want you to do. And why do they want it? To bring in central bank digital currency where every transaction is monitored and controlled. Do something they don't like the Canadian truckers did with the Trudeau, and with a flick of a switch, they can then turn your account off. No buying, no selling, nothing. And interestingly, these three banks we talked about were all places where crypto had their money. Crypto, like Bitcoin, is another thing the globalists hate because they can't control it. And another thing they want to eliminate. So to me, it was no surprise that these banks that went under were all crypto banks. And if all the money is in the top 5 largest banks, it is so much easier for the globalists to transition our economy to a controlled digital one, where they literally own every dollar and they kind of just loan it to you. Remember, you will own nothing and they will be happy. That is their motto. And of course, this eventually leads to the mark of the beast, where all buying and selling is shut off completely, unless you worship him. That is where all of this is going eventually. And are we going to stop them? No. God can stop them, and we can pray he does. But based on what I read when I open my Bible, this may be his will. His will for this world to usher in the return of Jesus. He may be allowing these evil people to do this, to allow their plan to work for a while. After all, the Bible prophesies Mystery Babylon will arise, will be drunk on the blood of his saints, and then the beast will take them over. God has told us all of this in advance, that it's going to happen. And now, no matter what end-time theory you favor, we're not escaping these beginning of the birth pangs as we're living in them right now. And they're about to get worse. So we need to know what to do in the midst of these things before any escape. What the Bible tells us to do. Because surprisingly, Jesus laid it all out for us. And that is why we're doing these conferences. Because the church is woefully unprepared for what's coming. How many sermons have you heard on these topics in the church in the last 3 years? None, right? And that's what I thought. So, after you buy your tickets, live events or online, click right here to listen to an interview with me and Jake McCandless about the risk the church has right now because they're not teaching this, the extreme risk, and what Last Days Overcomers plans to do about it. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.